Hey guys, this is Stephanie and I am Stacks on Stacks on Stacks. Today I'm coming to you with my June wrap up. I read 10 books in June and I think that was pretty good, saying that I was really busy in June and gone for an entire week. So there's that too. And on a side note, my lights have become possessed. I got them from Amazon like sometime at the beginning of the year, and I love them because they're purple and they're pretty. And I have two strands, one up here and one for the lower two shelves. And you can do fun things with them, like make them blinky or make them like the chasers. You can do all sorts of fun things with lights. I think it has like 8 or 9 different settings. And I just leave them on, just on all the time. And the top strand has gotten a mind of its own in the last month or two, and it just does what it wants. And I will switch it back to no, just stay. And it just does what it wants. And it'll do it in the middle of a video. Like I will be in the middle of a video and be like, my lights are blinking. Why are my lights blinking? And I had just put them on stationary. So I don't know, maybe I need new lights. Maybe I need lights that don't have personality, or maybe I'll just leave it. Who knows? But on to the wrap up. So the funny thing is I read 2 books before the 20th of June, and then I read 8 books after the 20th. So it's just pretty good. I was really busy the first half of June getting ready for our kids camp that we do. That's a week-long camp in June for foster kids, and it's so much fun. It's so great. I work from like usually January-ish till right before camp, and then we're gone for a week. And that was in the middle of June. So I was still pretty busy. Getting 2 books read basically in the first week was pretty good, because that second week I did not read a thing, not a thing. But coming back from camp, it's very emotional working with these amazing, wonderful kids. So coming back from camp, part of my therapy was just reading, and so I read 8 books. So now you know. First book I read was Beartown by Frederick Backman. Now, I have warned you guys twice that when I talk about this in my wrap up, I am going to spoil. And I am going to spoil. But first, before I spoil, I want to let you know basically what this is about. Now I'm going to spoil because I feel like I can't talk about this book very well without completely spoiling things. So I'm going to hold it up when I'm spoiling, but I'll do that in a second. So I rated this book a 4.4 personally and a 4.5 technically. The writing was a little different for me. It did this thing where it jumps from first person narrative to third person back and forth. So it'll be like, I got in my car and I started my car. And then it'll jump to a woman got in her car and started her car. And it's like, it's an odd transition. I actually have noticed a lot of contemporaries that have been written the last few years that are doing this technique. I don't really like it, to be honest. It is kind of an uncomfortable thing. I don't mind well, what woman are we talking about? We don't know. That part doesn't bother me. What bothers me is the perspective change. It's an uncomfortable change for me. And I don't read a lot of contemporaries. I don't think I've noticed that this is kind of a thing, but I've read like 5 contemporary this month, which is so not like me. And a couple of them have that aspect to it, and I was like, interesting. I don't know if I like that or not. It wasn't enough to make me stop reading the book. And obviously I did like it. A 4.4 is a pretty good rating. I didn't know anything about this book. I didn't know what to expect. So I think part of the rating came from not having a low expectation. Emma at Drinking by My Shelf, she said this was like the best book she read last year. So I was expecting a good book, but I just didn't know what to expect. And I'm sure some of that is why I gave it a good ranking. If I would have known what it's about, I might not have ranked it as highly, quite honestly. So basically this takes place in a small town in, I think, Sweden. And the town just revolves around sports, specifically hockey. And hockey is the thing in this town. And if you don't play hockey, you're nothing. If you don't love hockey, you're nobody, that kind of thing. And I grew up in a small town that was fairly sports centered, so I kind of get it. But they weren't, I don't feel like they were quite this crazy. So that is the base of it before I feel like anything else I say is going to spoil it. So I'm going to talk about spoilers now. When this book goes down, I will be done talking about the spoils. But I'm going to spoil hard. So if you haven't read it and you want to read it, stop watching now. You have been warned. Okay, so basically in this book, there is like a teenage kid. I think he's 17. His name is Kevin. And he goes to a party and he rapes a 15-year-old girl named Maya. Now, Kevin's a huge hockey guy. He's like on the A team and he's going to have a career in hockey in the future. And Maya's dad isn't as convinced that he is as good as he thinks he is and other people think he is. And he runs the hockey club. So she goes to a party and she kind of is making out with him, and then she's like, okay, no, stop. No, really, stop. And he rapes her, and one of his teammates walks in on the rape. Now, the teammate just happens to also like Maya, so he's probably upset for multiple reasons. In addition to which, Maya takes like 2 weeks before she tells anybody about this because she feels shame and she's afraid, and there are so many emotions attached to being a rape victim. I have never been raped, so I don't know what that feels like, to be serious, but I think I can empathize with some of this, and I think it would feel pretty horrible. And the action she took, like she burned the clothes that she was wearing that night, and she tried to erase all evidence of it because it's such a horrible feeling. You would rather be done with it. And then 2 weeks later, she's realizing, talking to her best friend, that it is not okay to hide this. I need to come out and I need to tell people this happened so this doesn't happen again, because he's just going to do it the next party with the next girl, and it's probably happened before and you don't know. So you have to speak out and be bold about it. And it's terrifying. So she does do that, but her timing, I shouldn't say it's poor, but when she decides to speak out about it is when like the big game is coming, and the police go and arrest him like right off the bus before he can go to his big hockey game. And all this town has is hockey. So the fact that she took the best player away from that big hockey game, the whole town is mad and they're blaming her. And so like more than half the town is like, she's a whore, she did this on purpose, things like that. And then the other half of the town is like, did this really happen? This didn't really happen. Let's pretend like this didn't happen. And she doesn't get support from this small town, and her father's job is in jeopardy, and it is a hot mess. And I think what I did like about this book is I feel like they take all of that emotion and they address it very well. And the biggest spoil, so if you really don't want to know the big ending, don't listen to this. The police find him not guilty because there's no evidence to convict him, despite the fact the kid that walked in did testify against him because she destroyed all the evidence, and I think they don't want to believe it. The police say he's okay. That's the big spoil. So then him and his parents leave the town because he would rather go play hockey in a bigger town that doesn't accuse him of rape, and the dad is going to be losing his job, but then he doesn't at the last minute. A gang of thugs basically convince the board not to fire him, and then they kind of wrap everything up in a somewhat neat bow, except that he wrote a sequel, and I'm currently reading the sequel, and I'm about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the sequel, and I don't find it engaging. I think some of that is when he wrapped it up at the end of this book, he didn't leave anything to be written about. So I feel like I'm 3/4 of the way through this book and I still know what's going to happen because it's still lining up with this. So I'm struggling through the second book. I'm not liking it as much, I think, because I already know what's going to happen because he told us the end of this book. So I actually have like put it on pause a few times. I've read a few books instead, and I don't know. I'll finish it, but it's not as engaging as this one was, and maybe that's because I knew so little about it. Maybe, I don't know. So the bit I really want to talk about was talking about rape. It is not talked about a lot in books. I don't think it's talked a lot about in books very well, but I feel like this book covers it very well. They don't make Kevin innocent, but they do paint what was going on in his brain. I really feel like you do see it from all sides. Again, it is not okay in the slightest that he did what he did, but you do get to see from his perspective, and that was interesting. That's the big thing that I want to talk about that was spoiling, is I wanted to talk about, I don't know a lot of other books that address this topic, and I don't know if I would read a lot of other books that address this topic for the reason that it is not a comfortable topic to read about. It's heinously uncomfortable, and I think I was grumpy for like a day and a half in the midst of reading this because I was just like, I hate the world, everything's unfair, nobody's like, just, throwing a fit because my character in my book was hurt. But I want to know your guys' thoughts on that. Like, it's an interesting concept. If you are through this much of that's the spoily review, then good on you. Hopefully you've read it. If you haven't, you know what's going to happen, but it's still worth reading. Okay, I won't spoil any more books, guys, I promise. The next book I read this month was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I hope I said that right. And I did like this book. I gave it a 4.5 technically and a 4.5 personally. I wasn't really expecting to like it. In my experience, a lot of the hyped books that I've been reading lately have really fallen flat. So I was kind of like, it might be okay. And it actually was quite good. The only part I think I really didn't like about it is it was definitely YA. Like, the romance was super YA. It was super predictable. And I don't know. I don't get on board for that. But the rest of the book I really liked. I liked the characters. I liked the character development. I liked the world and the magic system in the world. And I do believe this is a series because on Goodreads it says #1 by it. So it will be a series I will continue to read because I feel like they have set up such a good base that sequels will be good. It did have a few pacing issues. There were a few scenes that I felt were slow because we were rehashing something we'd already talked about. And I think they do that because they're like, okay, a reminder, this thing's coming up and you need to remember this part. But I read the book quickly enough that I didn't forget anything. So I didn't find those scenes necessary. But outside of that slight, very small pacing issue, I thought it was very well done. It was very interesting and there was a great driving force behind the plot. And that is something that's very necessary in fantasy. And I think it's necessary in most books, quite honestly. But in a fantasy book, if you don't have that, nobody's going to finish your book. All in all, a good fantasy read. Now, those are the 2 books that I read before my kids' camp. And then I got back from my kids' camp and I finished Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I had started this before camp and I didn't get through it very quickly, outside of the fact that I had a week off in the middle of it. This was not a page turner. I give it a 3.0 personally and a 3.2 technically. I think I originally had a higher ranking on it on Goodreads and then I lowered it because the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I really didn't like it a ton. Like, I feel like I wanted to like it more than I did like it. I'm not certain what I was expecting. I did know that this was a contemporary book, but I think most contemporaries have some pretty good character development because they don't have that fantasy aspect. They don't have the strong driving plot, so they have to have that to fall back on, and I don't know. It didn't do that for me, and that was kind of disappointing. Most contemporaries have very good character development. It's kind of a linchpin for those, and this just didn't have that for me. Basically, in this book, we are following a mother and daughter who move into a community, and this actually took place in like the late 90s, which I really enjoyed because that's when I was in high school, and I was like, Doc Martens, Jerry Springer, and I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so much fun. But it's sad that that was the best part of the book for me, was the 90s references. That's sad. Anyway, this mother-daughter moved to this town, and the daughter befriends a boy who is a kid in this family, a very, very rich family, who just happens to be the family that they are renting their house from. And I felt like they wanted to push the point of a poor kid becoming friends with a rich kid, and that plot really fell flat, which is why I was like, why were they pushing that? I mean, you could do a book about that and that could be interesting, but this was not interesting. I felt like it was a lot of random things thrown together and they're like, we're keeping it real. This book is real. This is about real life in the 90s. And I'm like, and I would agree. I mean, this was real life in the 90s. I was there. But it wasn't cohesive. Things happened in this book and it was like this thing happened and this thing happened and they weren't connected. It was like a bunch of little plots going on at the same time and they kind of end near each other. Like they do. But it was a stretch and it was a little uncomfortable. Like, just, I don't know. Maybe I don't like her writing style, but the book fell flat. The plot was not a driving force. I did not want to turn the page. And I was like, really? I was expecting so much more from this. Everybody loved this book like last year or the year before. And so it's going to be great. And it was fine. Again, maybe I wasn't in the mood for contemporary, but really, no driving force, none. I did like how they did these flashbacks for the characters, but that slowed up the lack of pacing even more. So all in all, it was not a good read. I enjoyed the atmosphere of the book, if that makes sense, but I didn't particularly enjoy the book, and I don't think I will read anything by Celeste Ng again because I didn't like it. And not liking that book actually put me in a pretty bad mood right after kids camp. So I decided to pick up a book I knew that I would like, which would be, and I'm going to read this because I never get it right, The Guernsey Literacy and Potato Peel Pie Society. This is by Marianne Schaefer and Ann Barrows. I give this a 4.5 personally and a 4.5 technically. I super enjoyed this book. It was super cute. I would qualify this book as a historical fiction book. It did have some romance in it, which was heinously predictable, but I was okay with that. I really enjoyed this book for what it was, I will say. I liked seeing this glimpse of life on this tiny island off of the UK just after the occupation of the Nazis in World War II. So basically in this book, we have a gal who is a writer for a newspaper. She's kind of looking for her next article, her next thing, and she kind of stumbles across this book club called the Guernsey Literacy and Potato Peel Pie Society, and they basically can read almost any book and then they're safe to talk about their book and they're safe to have their opinions in this woman's home. And And it came about during the occupation of the Nazis during World War II. And this island, if I'm thinking correctly, is between England and France in the Channel. I don't really know, but correct me if I'm wrong. And this was kind of a bit of a coping mechanism for these people. And it also was kind of an undercover thing for them to do things that were against the rules or whatever on the island. And like I said, it was cute, despite the fact it took place during World War II. Most books during World War II make me cry. I don't think I cried during this one. I might have teared up a little bit because there are definitely some sad bits. However, no, I did. I know I did. There's the thing with the character, and then it was like 3/4 of the way through the book, and then the thing happened, and I was like, no! And I literally yelled no at the book. I did, yes. But outside of that, it was a pretty like happy book, especially for a wartime book, and I liked it, and I will probably read it again sometime just because I think it's what I needed. It was a pick-me-up, it was lighthearted, and I was like, yay. And it was written all in letter form, and I kind of love that when it comes to books. I love it when they're in different formats. I think it's fun. I think it's a quicker read. I will say that Juliet's lingo in her writing was a little too modern. Most women in 1946 wouldn't be writing letters, I would say, with that phrasing, if that makes sense. It was very modern phrasing, and I've read enough Agatha Christie to know that people didn't quite talk like that back then in England. So it was a little, you could nitpick there, but I still loved it, and I will totally read it again. If you're looking for a little bit of a pick-me-up, this one just might do it. And it's not very long either. The next book that I read was Stormfront by Jim Butcher. This is the first book in the Dresden Files series, and it's a reread. I kind of just wanted to read a book I'd read before, and I was like, I'm going to read this one again. So I did, and I loved it. I loved it more the second time than the first time. I read these, oh my stars, a while ago. I would have to say I read this series like probably like 10 years ago. It was before we had our house, so it was quite a while ago, and it took me a couple years and I got all caught up. I was in a big hurry to read them, but there are 16 books in the series. I think the 16th one just came out, but I am going to be rereading them hopefully this year, and I loved it, and it was so much fun. Basically, in this book we follow a modern day wizard. His name is Harry, and he lives in Chicago. Harry has a great sense of humor, and he's smart, and he's fun, and he's funny, and he is very good at being a wizard. Now, these books were written in maybe 2000 is when the first one was written. It says 2000 in front of the book cover, but I'm not sure if that's when it was reprinted or originally written. If it was written prior to that, it was only a few years prior. So there's different technology and stuff like that. Like not everybody has a cell phone in the year 2000, stuff like that. And actually, as Butcher is writing through the series, he keeps up pretty well with technology and stuff like that. The amusing part is technology tends to go a little haywire around wizards and the magic folk. So Harry doesn't really have to do that much with technology, which is great because I kind of feel like I'm cursed when it comes to electronic things too. So something in common with the man. But basically, he helps like solve crimes and fight bad guys, and he has one foot in our world and one foot in the magic world, where there's like a wizarding council, and there's fae and there are trolls, and they just do such a good job of painting that world of like vampires and werewolves and all that supernatural stuff. And it's just so good. It's probably one of the first books I read with a bunch of supernatural stuff in it like that. So I feel like it's constantly what I am comparing the other stuff to, which might be a little unfair because it's really good writing. If you like magic, you'd probably like this book. Now, it is an adult book. It is not a YA book, but dude, he's a good writer. I don't think it matters. Next one I read is Operation SIN Agent Carter. It is a graphic novel. I actually read 2 graphic novels this month, and I think I gave it a 3.2 personally, and a 3.0 technically. Basically, this is after the movies and stuff like that. It's following Agent Carter on a few extra missions that Howard Stark pulls her in on, and it was fine. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It wasn't predictable. It was interesting, but I just don't know if I was quite in the mood for a graphic novel at that point, so it was okay. The next book I read was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I liked this book. I wasn't sure what to expect because the last contemporary book that I read was a bit of a disappointment. So I was like, we will see. And I really liked it. I really wasn't expecting to like it, but I really liked it. I gave it a 4.6 personally and a 4.3 technically. Sometimes the writing, I was just like, yeah. But I really like this book. Now, what gets me is, like I said, with most contemporaries, you don't have a great driving force because it's just not something that's in most contemporaries. Yet something about this book made me want to turn the page. Something about this book, I was like, I want to know what's going to happen. I can't explain it. I just wanted to know what was going to happen. In this book, we follow a girl named Eleanor Oliphant, and she's 30 years old, and she has a somewhat boring day-to-day job, something in an office. She works from like 8 a.m. to like 5 p.m. She does the same thing every day, all the time, like pizzas on Wednesday nights and so on and so forth. And then on the weekends, her hobby is drinking vodka. Eleanor doesn't have any friends. Eleanor has a standing phone call with her mother every week, and she talks to her mom and tells her what's going on with her week and things like that. But outside of that, Eleanor doesn't really have a lot of social interaction. Matter of fact, she doesn't understand social interaction, and she doesn't have a lot of social skills. Now, she understands things like, okay, I need to take a shower at least every other day just for my own personal habits. She understands manners. She understands how to have a budget. She doesn't understand how to interact with other human beings. So Eleanor and a guy that she works with, but not like closely with, they work for the same company, that's about it, see this older man collapse on the sidewalk, and they both go to help him and call 911 and stay with him and stuff like that. And Eleanor thinks, okay, it's a thing that happened and now it's in the past. However, the older man wants to meet her and thank her for saving him. And then she kind of gets pulled into his world of his family and friends. And she starts to see personal interactions this way, and she doesn't quite understand them. So maybe that's the driving force. Maybe the driving force for me was seeing the world through eyes that I don't see them through. And that's what most of this book was about. It was about seeing the world through Eleanor's eyes, and then seeing Eleanor's very slow but personal growth of realizing we do need other people, whether we realize it or not. In our lives, people encourage you and people lift you up. Now, people can be negative and break you down too, but the right people in your life will continue to motivate you. And as much of a loner as I can be and as much of an introvert as I can be, I do know that we do need other people. I just could take a break from people for like a week sometimes. All in all, I really enjoyed this book. Again, it's one I would think about reading again, but I would probably read something from Gail Honeyman again because I really did like it. The next book I read was Big Little Lies by Lane Moriarty, and this one was actually for the TBR Readathon, which I only have one book left to read for that. Super stoked about that. I gave this a 5.0 personally and a 5.0 technically. This was the challenge to read a book that was outside of my comfort zone, so I wasn't expecting to give it 5 stars, but I really liked this book. Now, first off, this book takes place in Australia. I was maybe a quarter of the way through the book when they made a comment about how summer came after Christmas, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. And then I looked up the author and I saw she was Australian, and I was like, oh, and it changed things a little bit. Like, they said certain things, I'm like, I don't understand what that means. And then I realized, well, Steph, it's because they're from another country and another culture. Haha. I wasn't expecting to like this book as much as I did, which is great. I think I liked it that much because the subject matter was what it is. Basically, in this book, we are following some moms of a kindergarten class. Now, some of the moms are stay-at-home moms, some of them are high, powered business women, and some of them just have part-time jobs. But basically, beginning in this book, there is a dead body. We don't know if the person was murdered or died on accident. We don't know if it's a child or an adult. We don't know anything. All we know is that there is a dead person, and at the end of every chapter, they have a few people making statements. Here's the only thing I didn't like about the book. The names. There were so many names. It was Brittany and Sally and Alice and Marina. And I'm like, am I supposed to keep track of all these people and what they say? And I was having a very hard time with all of the names. You don't have to keep track of all of the names. It would be handy if you could, but I don't think I have that kind of brain power. It was a lot of names and a lot of people to keep track of. The only thing I didn't like about the book. So I just didn't keep track of them. And then at the end, I went back and reread some bits. Yeah, that's what I did. What I did like about this book is it kept me guessing the whole time. I did guess the end fairly close to the beginning. I was like, well, what if it's this? But they made me second guess over and over. And then I was like, well, no, that's probably not it. It's probably something else. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. My first guess was right, but I had 15 other guesses. So I can't say I guessed the whole thing. What I liked about this was the character development. Somehow we could follow different moms and different kids and different people in the books, and I felt like I knew all of them. And I was like, really? I know all of them? That's so great. That's so fantastic. Really, really enjoyed this. And I did start watching the miniseries. I don't like it as much as I liked the book. I watched the first 4 episodes maybe. There's a lot of sex in it, and it's probably because it's HBO, and that's really not what I like to watch. But there's not that much in the book. Like, I can't think of any. There's swearing in the book, but swearing doesn't seem to bother me. So I was just surprised that they had that in every episode, and I was like, it's inferred and it's talked about, but it's not like written about. I will probably read more books by Lane Moriarty. I really did like this one. I really was surprised by it, and I enjoyed that. The next book I read is The Girl of Fire and Thorns stories, Shadowcats, Shadow Mountain, and King's Guard. I ranked each of these novellas differently. These are 3 novellas, part of the Girl of Fire and Thorns series. This will wrap it up for me. It means I finally read all the books in that series. I ranked Shadowcat 2.5 personally, 3.0 technically. Shattered Mountain was 2.8 personally and 3.0 technically, and King's Guard was 3.5 personally and a 3.0 technically. I would say these were all good novellas. I don't feel like they necessarily added more to the books as a whole, which is kind of what I like out of a novella, but all in all, they were fine. They were good. I don't know if I'd read them again. And the last book I read was for my TBR readathon, and that is Everybody's an Alien When You're an Alien 2, a book by Jomini Sun. This is kind of a graphic novel, like it has pictures and whatnot. Oh, that doesn't have words on it, but it's cute. Basically, this alien comes to Earth to kind of check things out and see what humans are like, and he meets animals and trees and thinks they're humans, which is so cute. In a lot of ways, this book was super cute. In other ways, it was kind of dumb. I ended up giving this a 3.0 personally and a 3.5 technically. I did like the pictures. I thought they were fun. The book overall is kind of odd, but I still liked it. And I did like the constant misspellings, probably because I don't know how to spell for beans, like the B and alien, and he puts B and human, and just adds random letters to words, and I thought it was cute and charming, and I'm sure it bothered other people, but it didn't bother me. And that was it. Those are the 10 books that I read in the month of June. Let me know if you've read any of these books and your thoughts on them, because I would love to know. Also, let me know the best book that you read in June. I would always like to know what the best book you read in June was. I post videos on Tuesdays and Fridays, so you can always find me here then. So don't forget to like and don't forget to subscribe. And if you don't want to miss any of my videos, click the bell icon, because sometimes YouTube doesn't post my videos. Who knows why? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.